Good morning. Welcome to Journey Community Church. So for those of you that maybe missed the communication throughout the week, we have made the decision as a leadership team to go to 100% online worship through the rest of this calendar year up to at least January 10th, and we hope we'll be back together then. But until then, we'll be able to worship together online with a skeleton crew here in the building. And look forward to worshiping with you and your families at home as you gather around your Advent wreaths. And so today we do start the season of Advent together, and I hope all of you have your Advent wreaths out ready. And today we're lighting the first candle, the purple one, on your Advent wreath. If you haven't yet gotten your Advent bag, just message the church office. We'd love to get one to you. It's not too late to join in participating in the Advent season together in this way. So on the first Sunday of Advent, we light one candle, and you'll light one candle for the rest of the week. It's a purple candle. And we often refer to this first candle as the candle of hope. And so it reminds us that in this Advent season, we celebrate how Jesus is the fulfillment of all of these promises we find throughout the Old Testament, that God would send a promised Messiah. Here's a couple of them that give you an example of. Isaiah 7:14. Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. And then in Micah 5, verse 2. But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient of days. And so with the candle of hope, we begin a journey through this Advent season that we're framing completely around the theme of hope. We're going to explore together the hope of Christmas that we find in Jesus. So let's join together in worship as we lift up our promised Messiah.
But it couldn't fill me. Man's empty praise and treasures that fail, never enough. Then you came along and put me back together. Every desire is now satisfied here in your love. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. Oh, there's nothing is better than you. I'm not afraid to show you my weakness, my failures and flaws. Lord, you've seen them all, and you still call me friend. 'Cause the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. There's not a place your mercy and grace can find me again. Oh, there's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing is better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing better than you. There's nothing is better than graves into gardens. You turn bones into armies. You turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. You're the only one who can. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing better than you, Lord. There's nothing. Nothing is better than you. There's nothing better than you. You're the only one. Sometimes on this journey, I get lost in my mistakes. What looks to me like weakness is a canvas of restraint. My story isn't over, my story's just begun. Failure won't define me, 'cause that's what my Father does. Failure won't define me, 'cause that's what my Father does. Ooh. Lay your burdens down. Ooh. Here in the Father's house. Check your shame at the door, 'cause it ain't welcome anymore. Ooh. You're in the Father's house. Arrival's not the end game, the journey's where you are. You never wanted perfect, you just wanted my heart. And the story isn't over if the story isn't good. Failure's never final when the Father's in the room. Failure's never final when the Father's in the room. Lay your burdens down. Ooh. Here in the Father's house. Check your shame at the door, 'cause it ain't welcome anymore. Ooh. You're in the Father's house. Prodigals come home, the helpless find hope. Love is on the move when the Father's in the room. The dead come to life. Love is on the move when the Father's in the room. Miracles take place, the cynical find faith. Love is breaking through when the Father's in the room. Jericho walls are quaking, strongholds now are shaking. Love is breaking through when the Father's in the room. Love is breaking through when the Father's in the room. Ooh. Lay your burdens down.
love the lyric that we just sang. It just jumped out at me. I don't know if I've heard it before when it said, "Arrival is not the end game. The journey is where you are." Well, if you're watching this, that's where you are today. Part of our Journey family, and we are this community of imperfect people who are making consistent progress together as we grow in God's grace. And one of the ways that we are consistently growing is in this grace of giving. And so if you're part of our Journey family, we give on a regular basis, even sacrificially. And now that we're all online, most of us are just going to keep doing what we've been doing, to text to give or set up online giving. You can set it up to mail in through your bank or mail in your offering directly, and we'll keep doing that. If you're watching and maybe you're not so much part of our Journey family, this next piece is for you and all of our Journey family. We are preparing for our annual Christmas offering. This is one of my personal favorite Christmas traditions of our Journey family. And so I'm praying that by God's grace, we will continue to grow in this grace of giving and outpace last year's offering, which was a record for us of over $37,000. And so we're praying that we'll surpass that, and the offering this year will be split 4 ways between our mission partners. So the longest standing global mission partnership with the Casa de Misericordia, the House of Mercy Orphanage in Piedras Negras, Mexico. Secondly, it'll go to U.S. disaster relief, because there's been a boatload of that this year, and we want to respond to people in our own nation. We'll do that in partnership with the United Methodist Committee on Relief, or UMCOR. And then 2 local partners that we've been walking with for a long time, the Hope Center based in Marysville and the Daily Needs Assistance Community Center here in Plain City. And so both of those ministries are responding to significant needs of our neighbors right here in Madison, Union counties, and the surrounding areas. And so as you give your regular offering for this week, I want to invite you to be praying into how your family is going to participate in our Christmas offering. We say all the time, this is not about finding extra money in your budget when we are already spending a lot on gifts. This is about reprioritizing in a way that puts the birthday of Jesus front and center. So we might spend a little less on gifts or not get gifts between husbands and wives, but we're going to reprioritize because we want to put the focus on Jesus by giving extravagantly to bless people in need. And so I invite you right now, you might pray on the Christmas offering and then use this time right now just to respond to giving in these moments.
Good morning, Journey Community Church. We're so glad that you could be with us online today. Hey, if you're new here, we would like to connect with you. So if you don't mind, just send a text to new to JCC at 94000. Advent season begins today. So if you haven't picked up your Advent bags yet, please stop by the church office Monday through Thursday from 9 to 2 to pick them up. There's a bunch of goodies inside for kids and adults, so make sure you get one. The next thing I want to talk about is the Community Christmas Basket. It's a great way to get involved with the community. So email, text, or call Janet Noble and see how you can obtain one of these cards to adopt a family. It's a great way to show the love of Jesus to those in our community. One of the ways that we can stay connected during this Advent season, since we won't be seeing each other in person, is for you to post your pictures to Journey CC Christmas with a hashtag, not a hash brown. Or you can email Mikkel directly. Now is the time to have another awesome message from Pastor Blaine. See you next week.
So can you remember your first experience of someone breaking a promise to you, the pain and disappointment that went with that? I remember vividly for me. I was 13 years old. It all unfolded at Camp Syker, one of my favorite places on earth, and I had confided in my best friend Doug. And I had told him that I liked a girl named Jenny, and that I was thinking about inviting her to the bonfire. Now, if you've done summer camp, you know that the bonfire or something similar to it is the event, right? Everybody has to have a date. It defines your social status and like your life plan, probably who you're going to marry or something. And so Doug promised that my secret was safe with him. It was a church camp. And so somewhere between that moment when my good friend promised me that he would keep my secret and the end of the evening service, I received a note. Now, young people, notes is what we did before we had cell phones and we could text. It's kind of archaic, but so I received a note, like she wrote on it, and she said in this note, "Yes, I will go to the bonfire with you." And I thought, I didn't ask you to the bonfire, and I'd only told one person that I had even thought about it. So I remember, like it was yesterday, walking into the dorm where the guys stayed and screaming Doug's name and slapping a wall and hunting him down. And that, my friends, was my first experience with the pain and disappointment of a broken promise. Now, I know that is very trivial, but I think it's emblazoned on my mind because it was the first time I'd experienced somebody breaking a promise to me. And I know some of you are wondering, I did end up going to the bonfire with Jenny. It was okay. And my friendship with Doug did recover so that he's still a good friend today. I share that just to get us thinking a little bit about the pain and the disappointment that comes with broken promises, because we've started this Advent series that's all about the hope of Christmas. And our hope tends to get depleted in a hurry when we experience broken promises. Because when people don't come through, we lose our will to hold on to hope. And so, kind of with that backdrop, I want to invite you to think for a moment as we start this whole series on the hope of Christmas. Just kind of do a personal inventory with me. Think for a moment about how full is your hope tank. You might think about kind of globally in your life in general. You might think about specific areas like how full is your hope tank in your marriage or in your family or in your friendships or relationships or maybe in school or the sports you love or your career. You might even think more general like what's your hope tank when it comes to our nation or the world? Maybe it's good we're not in the room and nobody can talk about that. But, how full is your hope tank? I'm just working with this assumption that some of us are maybe full to overflowing with hope. Your tank is full, maybe across the board or maybe in a specific area it is. And that's awesome. And if that's you, I just want to encourage you that you have a tremendous opportunity in this Christmas season to share your story and to encourage others, because the reality is that most people listening to my voice can identify at least one area, and for some multiple areas or just globally, where their tank is depleted. It's low or running on fumes, or maybe some would even say your hope tank is just empty. And you're having a hard time holding on to hope in any area of life. So if that's you, then you're in the right place and you're plugging in with us at just the right time, because we're gonna consider together today and in the weeks ahead how we can experience God filling our tank. And I think this is a timely message we're diving into, because I don't know about your experience, but for me and my family, 2020 has been a year where it's been hard to hold on to hope, because there's been so many disappointments and so much frustration. I mean, I think we have a senior in our house, and this has not been the senior year that he hoped for or that we hoped for him. And we want to hold on to hope for what's going to kind of be the rest of this year. Back to remote learning now until the end of the year, it's just hard, right? And what do we do in that? Even as a pastor and as a leader, we started 2020 with lots of hopes and dreams and expectations for Journey and for how God was going to work and what was going to happen in our community. And it's been a crazy year. And I imagine all of you can name some areas where you've experienced frustration, disappointment, discouragement, because some hopes have been unfulfilled for you. And I think one of the natural tendencies for us when we face disappointment when promises are broken is that we can protect ourselves by just lowering our expectations. Because if we lower our expectations, if we don't trust anybody to keep their promises and they break them, I'm all right? If we don't hold on to hope, then when something goes bad, then we're not as disappointed. We're not as discouraged. Maybe it's just a mental game we play with ourselves. And maybe there's something to that if we don't hold on to a lot of great high hopes, then yes, we won't be as disappointed. But there's a tragic side effect to that strategy, and that's that when we lose hope, we also miss out on joy and peace and laughter and love and all of those good things that bring satisfaction in our lives. So we're gonna step into this Advent season together, wherever our hope tank might be low, and instead of lowering our expectations, the invitation I want to extend to us during these days is to raise our expectations. And so what I'm suggesting is that we don't, kind of like dip our toes in the water of hope and try to find something that we might grasp onto or have a little bit of hope. What I'm suggesting is that we cannonball jump into the waters of hope, that it might overflow in our lives. And so here's the theme verse that is going to kind of carry us through the whole season of Advent. And I'm going to invite you to actually memorize this verse. It's not that long, and it's packed full of good news. It's a great verse to memorize out of Romans chapter 15, verse 13. Here it is. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in faith, so that you overflow with the hope by the power of the Holy Spirit. So here's the important piece. That the only way to raise our expectations and not end up incredibly disappointed and devastated is that we have to have a trustworthy source of hope. We have to place our hope in someone or something that will not disappoint. And this verse points us in that direction. It starts with this great phrase, may the God of hope. And that's the foundation for overflowing joy and peace and love and power in our lives. I love some of the other translations of this verse, that God of hope phrase. Some say God is the inspiration and fountain of hope, or the source of hope. And one of the things about this short little verse that's important to realize is that hope is being used in two very different ways. So it's describing the God of hope, and then it's describing us being filled with hope. And so let's just be clear that when it says the God of hope, it's not describing that the eternal creator God who's sovereign over the universe is not sitting in heaven hoping for good things to happen. Okay, that's not what it's saying. God doesn't hope for. He's eternally present, right? And so it's saying that God is the source of everything that fills us with hope. He is the foundation. Hope begins with Him. He is the object and foundation of our hope. And when we place our attention, our focus, our hope on this God of hope, then we, in turn, can actually not have a little bit of hope. Not just hold on to some scraps of hope, but our hope can overflow in our lives. So here's the contrast to that. When hope is in short supply, it's almost always because we have placed our hope in the wrong people or things. We've placed our hope in the things and people of this world that cannot fulfill our expectations. And when we place our ultimate trust in the people and things of this world, we will experience our hope being depleted or outright disappearing. And that is not a possibility. It's not a maybe. It is an absolute guarantee. Because the people and things of this world, they simply cannot satisfy our hopes. They can't keep the promises that they make to us or the expectations that we place on them. And you've experienced this. We've all experienced it. I gave you a trivial example. My friend did keep his promise, right? And that's par for the course when we have relationships with imperfect people. I want you to think for a moment in your journey. Just think for a moment about one of the seasons in your life that was really low on hope. You might even say hopeless. I want you to think about what was going on in that season. What were the factors that contributed to you feeling so hopeless? If you dig deep enough, there's a pretty near sure possibility that you might discover your hopelessness is rooted in the fact that someone or something couldn't deliver on the promises that maybe they didn't make the promises to you. Your job didn't promise to give you satisfaction and fulfillment, but you placed that expectation on your career, and then you hit the pinnacle of your career and it couldn't deliver. Or maybe you placed your hopes on a certain someone, Mr. Right or Mrs. Right. And if you could just find that right person, that your hope for joy and satisfaction would be fulfilled. I can tell you honestly, Jody and I have shared out of our journey that we've gone through some tough days. And some of the most hopeless days are when, in the midst of our marital stuff, when I was placing my hope either in her or in myself. And while my wife is amazing, she is not always 100% of the time a trustworthy source of hope, right? Because she's just like me, an imperfect person. And sometimes we don't deliver on our promises. And in the same way, I've hoped in myself. I thought that I could handle something or I could fix something. And those are the times when I came to the end of myself and I was still hoping that I could make it right. And I imagine if you dig deep enough into the times of hopelessness and discouragement in your journey, you're going to discover something similar. This will date me a little bit, but I think the old movie Jerry Maguire kind of gives us a picture of this, and some of you will understand what I'm talking about, but it's the Jerry Maguire effect is what I sometimes refer to this as. If you know the movie, Tom Cruise plays Jerry Maguire, and there's this whole big romantic thing going on, and at the end of the movie, this grand climactic scene where they come together, and he speaks these words to his wife, "You complete me." And all the girls melt and cry, and it's really touching and all of that, and it's awesome for Hollywood, but it is a recipe for disaster in relationships and marriage and friendships. It's a recipe for disaster in life in general, because the bottom line is other people and things of this world cannot complete us. No matter how badly we want them to, no matter how bad they want to, no matter how we expect them to, we can't look for completion apart from God and avoid the eventual disappointment and discouragement, the eventual depletion of our hope. Because people and things break their promises to us, spoken or unspoken. And so when we're in Romans 15, if we read the broader passage, I encourage you to read the whole passage. But listen to a couple of pieces in this chapter 15, verse 4 starting. And what we're going to read here is it just underscores that our hope can overflow because God always keeps His promises. God always keeps His promises. He's never a promise breaker. He's always a promise keeper. And so Romans 15 is unpacking a little bit of how Jesus is the fulfillment of God's promise for a Messiah for His people. So verse 4 says this, "And the Scriptures give us hope and encouragement as we wait patiently for God's promises to be fulfilled." And then verse 8, a little bit further down, it says, "Remember that Christ came as a servant to the Jews to show that God is true to the promises He made to their ancestors. And He also came so that the Gentiles might give glory to God for His mercies to them." And then another verse, jump into 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 20. It just gives this summary statement. For all of God's promises have been fulfilled in Christ with a resounding yes. I mean, the reason that Advent and Christmas is a season of hope is because it directs our attention to Jesus. And his birth is the fulfillment of all of these promises of God all throughout the Old Testament. And that is the foundation for our hope. We could say it this way, that our hope is the confident expectation that God's promises will be fulfilled. So Christ-centered hope, biblically grounded hope, is not wishful thinking that things are going to turn out well. It's not just wishful thinking that we're going to get what we want. Biblically grounded, Christ-centered hope that we're talking about is rooted in the certainty that God always fulfills his promises. In that in Christ, God fulfills many of those promises and really inaugurates the fulfillment of others that will continue to follow. In his first coming, he fulfills promises, and Advent really anticipates his second coming when all of those promises will be ultimately fulfilled. And so, hope in a biblical sense is not about me and my preferences. It's not about my selfish wants. And it's important to note that because there's a brand of theology out there that is claiming as Christian that espouses an idea of if you just name it and claim it, that God's desire for you is health and wealth and prosperity. But the big problem with that is that it's putting, it's like taking our selfish desires and then just slapping a Jesus sticker on it and saying this is what you can hope in. But it sets people up for disappointment because that's about what I want. It's not about God's promises being fulfilled. So our hope, rooted in Jesus, is about the certainty of God's promises being fulfilled, not just our personal preferences. So let me just kind of bring us full circle. As you're thinking about your personal experience of hope or lack thereof, I don't know how full or empty your hope tank is. But my encouragement to you today is that you don't have to wait for other people or circumstances to change for your hope tank to begin to get filled. And not just filled a little bit, but filled up to overflowing as we place our hope in Jesus. And so I want to invite you to consider two questions as we close today that might help us shift our focus from trusting in the people and things of this world to trusting in the certainty of God's promises being fulfilled. So here's the first question. How has God already fulfilled his promises to you? And one of the best ways to find hope for the today and the future is to know that God has fulfilled so many promises already. And when we look at the Christmas story, we look at the birth of Jesus, there's so many promises we see unfolding that are fulfilled. But think about it more personally. What are some of the ways that God's made promises to you and then fulfilled them? You know, as I was thinking about this myself, one of the things that came to mind first was just the way I've experienced God fulfilling his promises to be with me, to be faithful to me. And here's an ironic closing to this message. One of the ways that God has done that most consistently in my life has been through people like my friend Doug. So not only did our friendship recover from that train wreck when we were 13, but he's continued to this day to be one of my closest friends. And I've experienced God's promise of faithfulness being fulfilled in that friendship. I know that he would do anything. He would lay down his life for me, that he's always there for me. And there's a circle of friends along with him that over the years, like over the long haul, guys like Doug and Carl and Franco and Paul and Ryan and Rob and these friends that I've experienced God's promises being fulfilled in my life through people with skin on, right? And I'm sharing that just to say it's just one example. But when I dwell on the fulfillment of God's promises in those ways and in lots of others, it shifts my focus. Instead of focusing on the problems or on my unmet expectations or what I want that I'm not getting, it shifts my focus to go, no, God has kept his promises to me. There is a reason for me to hold on to hope. So that brings us to the second question, which would be this. Think about God's promises already fulfilled. What are the promises of God that you need to hold on to today? What are the ways that you need to make a choice not to lower your expectations, not to give up on hope so you're not disappointed, but you need to grab hold of some of the certain promises of God that he is and will fulfill in your life? I don't know what those might be for you. Maybe it's the promise of his presence or his provision, or maybe God's given you a very specific promise for a relationship that is broken and hurting, and you're about to give up on that person, and you need to hear God say, no, hold on to hope. I'm going to make a way in that relationship. Maybe this pandemic has turned your finances upside down and you are discouraged and you're in despair. You need to hold on to the promise that God is your provider. He's never going to leave you or forsake you or abandon you, that he's going to take care of you. What are the promises for you in your life circumstance right now? So what has he already fulfilled that you can receive encouragement from? And then today, what are the promises that you need to hold on to as you step into the future? As we close in worship today, we're gonna sing a song that is a declaration that fits so perfectly with a message about the God of hope. We are going to declare together that God is a way maker. He is a promise keeper. That when you think there is no way, he's going to make a way. And the promises that he has made to us, he will keep them. And our hope is in the certainty of his promises fulfilled. So I want to invite you, wherever you're sitting, standing today, let's worship together to make this our declaration.
Darkness, my God, that is who you are. in every heart. I worship you. I worship you. 'Cause you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keep, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keep, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Miracle worker, promise keep, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keep, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 When I can see that you're working, even when I can feel that you're working, you never stop working. You never stop working. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I can feel that you're working, you never stop working. You never stop working. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are.
Well, that song should get us ready to leave this time of worship as people who are trusting in the God of hope. So my prayer over us this week is that we would go out trusting in a God who is the way maker, trusting in his promises because he has already fulfilled them, and anticipating the fulfillment of his promises because we have a confident hope rooted in Jesus Christ. Have a blessed week.